Bail Organa's ship was parked on one of the private platforms of his residence in Alderaan, the snow-covered mountains creating a serene landscape that brutally contrasted with the internal turmoil of its passengers. Obi-Wan Kenobi was seated in one of the main cabin's armchairs, staring fixedly at nothing while his mind incessantly replayed the scenes from Mustafar. The flames, Anakin's screams, the moment when everything he loved turned to ash. Master Yoda was in deep meditation in the opposite seat, his eyes closed and his ears occasionally twitching as if listening to something beyond the normal range of the senses. They had just left the newborn twins in Bail's care, with specific instructions about keeping them separated and safe, a painful precaution against an uncertain future. Senator Organa was in the adjacent compartment, giving them privacy to process the magnitude of everything that had happened. "It's over, Master. We've lost everything. The Order, the Republic, Anakin, everything is gone." Obi-Wan finally broke the silence, his voice laden with an exhaustion that went beyond the physical. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 48 hours, lines of sadness marking his face. Yoda remained silent for a long moment, but something in his posture had changed. His ears were no longer relaxed, but erect, attentive. When he finally opened his eyes, there was something in them that Obi-Wan didn't expect to see. A glimmer of possibility, a spark of something that could be hope or perhaps something more dangerous. "Over, perhaps it is not. A chance still exists since I can change everything, still we can," the old master said, his voice low but charged with an intensity that made Obi-Wan straighten in his chair. Obi-Wan looked at Yoda with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. How could there still be a chance? The Emperor controlled the galaxy. The Jedi were dead or hiding. Anakin was lost forever to the shadows. "Master, I don't understand. How can we change anything now? The Empire has already established itself. Palpatine has won. We're just two Jedi against an entire galaxy," he argued, although part of him desperately wanted to believe there was some way out that he couldn't see. Yoda rose slowly, leaning on his staff, and walked to the ship's window, looking at the mountains beyond. "During my meditation, something ancient I discovered. Echoes in the Jedi archives, mentions in texts long forgotten. A place exists where time differently flows. The world between worlds, it is called. Cross through the past, change what was done, possible it may be." Yoda's words fell upon Obi-Wan like a shock of cold water. Time travel? This was territory that went beyond anything he had studied, theoretical concepts that most Jedi considered impossible or too dangerous to even contemplate. "Master, manipulating time. The consequences could be catastrophic. We don't know what side effects this could have, what paradoxes it could create. And even if it were possible, where would we find such a place?" He stood as well, approaching Yoda with a mixture of fear and growing fascination. If there truly was a way to undo everything, to save Anakin before it was too late, to prevent the Empire's rise, wouldn't it be his obligation to try, no matter how risky? Yoda turned to face him directly, and Obi-Wan saw absolute determination in the Master's ancient eyes. "In the ruins of an ancient temple, this portal exists. Coordinates I received through the Force during my deepest meditation. A call from something beyond comprehension. On a remote world called Lothal, find this place we can. But alone I cannot go. With me you must come, Obi-Wan. Together a chance we have. Separated, lost is all hope," Yoda explained, extending his small hand in a gesture that was both a request and a command. Obi-Wan hesitated for only a moment, thinking about the children they had just left, about the dark future that awaited them. He thought of Anakin, of Padme, of all the dead Jedi. If there was even a tiny chance to change everything, he had to try. Obi-Wan then agreed, and they departed immediately. The planet emerged before them as they exited hyperspace, a world of golden plains and distant mountains under a deep blue sky. There was no significant Imperial presence yet. This was a very remote planet and apparently without strategic importance. They landed near an ancient rock formation that rose from the plains like twisted fingers pointing at the sky. Upon disembarking, Obi-Wan could feel something strange in the air, an electric charge that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The force here was different, more concentrated. as if the very fabric of reality was thinner in this place. Feel this, Obi-Wan? As if the veil between moments, more transparent it were here. Yoda commented as they began walking toward the ruins that rose before them. The structures were ancient beyond comprehension, covered with symbols that not even Yoda could completely decipher. They walked through narrow corridors where sunlight created geometric patterns on the stone floor until they reached a central dome-shaped chamber. And there, in the exact center of the room, was something that took Obi-Wan's breath away. A circular portal floated in the air, its surface rippling like disturbed water, showing quick glimpses of different places and times. Through it, Obi-Wan saw for an instant Qui-Gon Jinn alive and young. Then he saw battles from the Clone Wars. Then he saw the Jedi Temple itself in Coruscant during more peaceful days. By all systems, it's real. It really exists, he murmured, slowly approaching the portal with reverence and fear. Enter we must. Find the right moment when vulnerable Palpatine is, before completely consummated his plan is, but after revealed his true nature has. A narrow window exists. Know this I do, Yoda said, already beginning to approach the portal. Obi-Wan hesitated for only a moment, thinking about all the warnings they had read about tampering with time, about the unforeseen consequences of altering past events. But then he thought of Anakin, of Padme, of the children who had just been born and who would grow up orphans in a universe dominated by evil. He thought of all the dead Jedi, of Qui-Gon, of his friends and colleagues massacred by betrayal. If there was a chance, even a tiny chance, to undo that horror, they had to try. Together then, he finally said, extending his hand to Yoda. The small master held it firmly, and together they crossed the rippling surface of the portal. The transition was like being unmade and remade in an instant. Obi-Wan felt his consciousness expand beyond the limits of his body, as if he could see and feel everything that had already happened and everything that would still happen simultaneously. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ended, and he was standing in a space that defied all logic. There was no solid ground, but he was standing on something. There was no sky or walls, only an infinite void of a bright blue-green that extended in all directions. And scattered throughout this void, hundreds, perhaps thousands of circular portals floated, each showing a window to a different moment in time. Some showed events he recognized, others were completely unknown. The sound was strange here, echoes of conversations and battles and celebrations overlapping in a cacophony that somehow wasn't unpleasant. Extraordinary. Beyond time and space we are. See everything we can. Past, present, even fragments of possible futures, Yoda said beside him, his voice full of wonder. The small master was already moving, floating somehow between the portals, examining each one carefully. Obi-Wan followed him, still trying to process what his eyes were seeing. In one portal, he saw himself still young, being trained by Qui-Gon. In another, he saw Anakin still a child, running through the streets of Mos Espa on Tatooine. Each portal was a window to a specific moment, preserved here in this impossible place. He hesitantly extended his hand toward one of the portals, and his hand passed through the surface as if it were mist. Careful. Touch we can, but enter without intention we must not. Lost here? Stay someone can, wandering between moments forever, Yoda warned. They began to search methodically, examining portal after portal, seeking the exact moment they needed. Obi-Wan saw the Battle of Geonosis, saw the Battle of Coruscant, saw countless Jedi Council meetings. Each vision brought painful memories of a time that was gone, of people who had already died. Then Yoda stopped abruptly before a specific portal, his expression becoming somber. Here, this moment it is, he said quietly. Through the portal, Obi-Wan saw the interior of Chancellor Palpatine's office. Anakin was there, clearly agitated, speaking rapidly with the Chancellor about something. The scene was familiar, terribly familiar. This was the moment before Anakin discovered the truth about Palpatine, before everything fell apart. Observe we must. See when exactly the revelation happens. The precise moment is critical. Too early and no one will believe. Too late and consummated it will be, Yoda explained, sitting on what appeared to be solid air before the portal. Obi-Wan joined him, and together they watched the events unfold like invisible spectators of an already written tragedy. They saw Anakin enter the Chancellor's office, clearly disturbed, talking about visions and fears. They saw Palpatine carefully weave his words, planting seeds of doubt about the Jedi, offering forbidden knowledge as bait. The conversation extended for long minutes, each word from the Chancellor calculated to manipulate the tormented young Jedi. Then they saw the crucial moment, when Palpatine finally revealed his true identity, admitting to being the Sith Lord everyone was looking for. The expression of shock and horror on Anakin's face was painful to witness, even knowing how everything would end. That moment it is, Obi-Wan murmured, seeing Anakin recoil from the Chancellor, his saber almost being activated before he controlled himself. The words were muffled through the portal, but they could read lips. Anakin was saying he would inform the Jedi Council that Palpatine would be tried for treason. The Chancellor only smiled, that calculated smile that had deceived the galaxy for decades, and let Anakin leave. Why let him go did he? Confident he was that return Anakin would, that the darkness already planted was. Yoda observed somberly, his ears drooping slightly as he realized how deeply Palpatine had manipulated the situation. They saw Anakin hurriedly leave the office, clearly conflicted, running through the ornate corridors of the Senate toward the Jedi Temple. Time accelerated as they followed his journey through the portal. Obi-Wan checked his lightsaber for the third time, a nervous action that made no difference but gave him some comfort. Through the temporal window, they could see Palpatine moving about the office, occasionally stopping to give orders through his communicator. Clone guards passed through the outer corridors, but the office itself was empty except for the Sith Lord. When we cross, normal time will flow for us. Quick and decisive we must be. Hesitation, death will mean, Yoda instructed, opening his eyes and looking directly at Obi-Wan. The younger Jedi Master nodded, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. They were about to do something unprecedented, something that could save billions or destroy everything in ways they couldn't predict. Together we go. At my signal, through, Yoda said, positioning himself before the portal. Obi-Wan stood beside him, and both extended their hands toward the rippling surface. The Force flowed through them, connecting them to the portal, preparing the passage. Yoda counted mentally, synchronizing the exact moment. 3, 2, 1. They crossed through. The sensation was different this time, more focused, like passing through a tight membrane that resisted but eventually yielded. When they emerged on the other side, it was in a discreet corner of the Chancellor's office, behind an ornamental column that provided some cover. The lights of Coruscant shone through the enormous panoramic windows, the planet city indifferent to the drama unfolding at its political heights. Palpatine was with his back to them, looking at a holographic screen showing a map of the galaxy. His voice was a mixture of his previous paternal tone and something more sinister as he spoke into the communicator. Yoda touched his arm lightly, a silent warning not to act rashly. They needed to wait for the right moment, when Palpatine would disconnect the communicator and be truly vulnerable. Each second seemed like an eternity as they watched and waited. Finally, Palpatine finished his communication and deactivated the hologram. He turned slowly, and it was then that he noticed something wrong. His eyes narrowed, and his head tilted slightly, like a predator detecting prey. Peculiar. I sense presences that shouldn't be here, he murmured to himself, his hand beginning to move toward the lightsaber hidden in his robes. Obi-Wan and Yoda emerged from the shadows simultaneously, their sabers already activated and glowing in blue and green colors. Palpatine's expression changed from curiosity to genuine surprise, and then to fury. Yoda, Kenobi, it's over for you, Chancellor. Or should I say, Darth Sidious? Your crimes against the Republic and against the Jedi end here, Obi-Wan declared, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at his insides. Palpatine studied them for a long moment, and then, surprisingly, laughed. It wasn't the maniacal laughter of a madman, but something more calculated, almost amused. His mind was clearly working, trying to understand how his plans had been thwarted. There were no more words. Palpatine attacked first, his twisted fingers shooting blue and violent lightning toward the two Jedi Masters. Obi-Wan and Yoda separated, deflecting the Sith energy with their sabers as they began to move in a coordinated pattern they had practiced 1,000 times during the war. The office exploded into chaos, expensive furniture being hurled through the air like projectiles, windows cracking under the pressure of force waves, holograms flickering and dying as electrical systems overloaded. Palpatine was fast, terribly fast, his red saber appearing in his hand and moving in patterns that defied the human eye to follow. "Fools! Do you think you can defeat me? I am the dark side. I am the power that will rule the galaxy for 1,000 years," he screamed between attacks. But this time was different. Obi-Wan and Yoda weren't fighting defensively, weren't trying to arrest or capture him. They were fighting to kill, with a determination born from having seen the horrible future he would create. Each attack was meant to be fatal, each movement calculated to penetrate his defenses. Yoda leaped and spun, his small form becoming a green blur of pure energy, attacking from impossible angles. Obi-Wan used his defensive form to create openings, forcing Palpatine to expose himself while defending against one while the other attacked. The Sith Lord was being pushed back, and for the first time in a long time, Obi-Wan saw something in his yellow eyes that could be real fear. "Impossible! How are you doing this?" Palpatine hissed, blocking a double attack by millimeters. Outside, the clone guards were trying to force the doors, their muffled shouts penetrating through the force barriers. But Yoda maintained the seal, knowing they needed just a few more moments. Palpatine tried a different tactic, using the Force to rip pieces of furniture and hurl them like missiles. A heavy table flew toward Obi-Wan, who cut it in half with his saber, but the distraction allowed Palpatine to create some distance. "You don't understand. Everything I did was to save the galaxy. The Jedi were arrogant, blind. I brought order to chaos," he argued, but his words sounded hollow even to his own ears. He was buying time, looking for an exit, an advantage he could exploit. But there was none. Yoda finally saw the opening he was waiting for. Palpatine had moved too close to one of the panoramic windows, and his attention was divided between the two attackers. The small master used the Force to push with all his considerable strength, not at Palpatine directly, but at the window itself behind him. The reinforced glass exploded outward in a shower of bright fragments, and the Sith Lord staggered, losing his balance for a fraction of a second. It was all Obi-Wan needed. He launched himself forward, his blue saber cutting through the air in a perfect arc. The blade met flesh and bone, passing through Palpatine's chest from side to side. The Sith Lord gasped, his eyes widening in absolute shock. "No, I was the chosen one," he gurgled, blood dripping from his mouth. Yoda didn't give him the chance to use some last Sith trick. His green saber cut in a quick horizontal movement, severing the head of the man who had almost destroyed everything good in the galaxy. Palpatine's body, Chancellor of the Republic and secret Sith Lord, fell lifeless on the floor of his own office. His dark presence in the Force flickered and extinguished like a suffocated flame. Absolute silence filled the space for a moment, suspended in time. Obi-Wan and Yoda stood still, breathing heavily, barely able to believe they had actually succeeded. Outside, the voices of the clone guards grew louder, but they were shouting in confusion now, not alarm. Something had changed in them, as if a spell had been broken. "Done it is. Dead the Sith Lord is. Return now we must, before more complications arise," Yoda said, already moving toward the point where they had entered. Obi-Wan took one last look at the body on the floor, making sure it was real, that Palpatine was truly dead. Then he followed Yoda back through the temporal portal that still remained invisible in the corner of the office, returning to the world between worlds and, through it, back to their own time. The transition back to their own time was smoother, as if the universe was helping to guide them home. When they emerged from the temple ruins on the planet, the sun was setting, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. But something was fundamentally different in the air. The oppression that had weighed upon the entire galaxy since the Empire's rise had disappeared, replaced by something lighter, more hopeful. Obi-Wan staggered as he exited the ruins. his legs almost giving way beneath him as the exhaustion of everything they had done finally caught up with him. "Master, did it work? Did we really change everything?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Yoda was leaning heavily on his staff, also clearly exhausted, but there was a gleam in his eyes that wasn't there before. "Feel like an great change in the Force. Like a river that changed its course, history flowed in a new direction. See now we must, what world we created," Yoda responded, beginning to walk back toward the ship they had left parked. When they reached the ship and activated the communication systems, they were immediately flooded with messages. But these weren't messages of escape or despair as they expected. They were status reports, requests for guidance, normal transmissions from a republic that still functioned. Bail Organa's voice came through the communicator, clear and without the tone of sadness it carried before. "Jedi Masters, where have you been? We've been bombarded with news. Chancellor Palpatine has been killed. They say he was discovered as a Sith Lord and eliminated during an attempted coup. The Republic is in shock, but the Jedi Council is helping maintain order." Obi-Wan and Yoda exchanged significant glances. People's memories had adjusted to the new timeline, creating rational explanations for events that didn't involve time travel. To the universe, it appeared that Palpatine had been discovered and killed by unidentified Jedi during his attempt to execute Order 66. Not that two time travelers had gone back and changed history. "And what about Anakin Skywalker? How is he?" Obi-Wan asked, almost afraid of the answer. There was a brief pause before Bail responded. "Anakin? He's here with me in Alderaan with Padme and the babies." He was quite disturbed by the revelations about Palpatine. Apparently they were close, but he's recovering. "Do you want to speak with him?" Bail's voice sounded confused about why that question would be necessary. Obi-Wan had to sit down, his legs finally giving way as tears of relief rolled down his cheeks. Anakin was alive. Padme was alive. The babies were with both parents. The Empire never existed. All the Jedi who had died in Order 66 were still alive. The entire galaxy had been saved. "Yes, please. We would very much like to speak with him," he managed to say through the tears. There were a few moments of static, and then the familiar and wonderfully undistorted voice of Anakin Skywalker came through the communicator. "Obi-Wan, Master Yoda, are you all right? Where were you when everything happened? It was absolutely insane. I never suspected Palpatine was a Sith. He was my mentor for so long. I feel like an idiot for not seeing it." Anakin's voice carried guilt, but it was the normal guilt of someone who had been deceived, not the torment of someone who had fallen to darkness. Deceived many were. Young Skywalker, master of deception Palpatine was. Important it is not what you did not see, but what now you will do. With your children be you must. Father and Jedi, both you can be. Yoda spoke into the communicator, his voice carrying a warmth he rarely demonstrated. Anakin laughed, a genuine and happy sound that made Obi-Wan's heart tighten with memories of how things used to be. "The babies are incredible masters. Luke has Padme's nose and Leia has my temperament, from what it seems. You have to come meet them properly. Padme is insisting on making dinner to celebrate that we survived all this. When can you arrive?" Obi-Wan looked at Yoda, who nodded slowly. "We'll be there soon, my old friend." "Soon," Obi-Wan responded, disconnecting the communication. They sat in silence for a long moment, just absorbing the magnitude of what they had accomplished. They had defied time itself, risked everything, and had won. The galaxy had a future again, a future that included hope, peace, and a second chance for all who had lost so much. Prepare for journey we must. A family reunited. Witness we want to, Yoda finally said, his voice soft but full of deep contentment. Obi-Wan agreed, configuring the ship's controls for Alderaan, toward a life he never thought possible again, toward a tomorrow they had conquered through impossible courage and sacrifice.